pass on the link to those that, you would want to benefit from this. I want to thank you again for joining us today. We look forward to an engaging and informative session. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and introduce our speaker. Susan, go ahead.
Khary Campbell currently leads the research function, serving as the Vice President of Consumer Research and Insights at Comcast. Khary's team ensures the business can make decisions grounded in consumer truth, needs, and context. As a member of the broader executive team for enterprise business intelligence, he plays a critical role in helping set the strategic vision and paths for executional excellence, growing stakeholder relationships, and developing the career growth of others. Prior to joining Comcast, Khary has served in a series of leadership roles at globally renowned companies, such as L'Oreal, where he served as the Assistant Vice President of Research and Innovation, General Mills, where he served as Head of Insights, and as the co-founder of multimedia company Scheme Magazine, where he and his partner successfully exited after 3 years of operation. With a passion for DE&I and community, Khary has served in several leadership roles for community and association boards, as well as corporate ERG programs. Khary is a servant leader who believes a growth mindset allows for quick yet well-informed decisions that deliver both results and future opportunities. As a global leader with expat experience, his teams have delivered best-in-category innovations, results, and growth globally. Never satisfied with good enough, Khary continues to invest in his abilities as a communicator, team builder, negotiator, and strategic thinker. Khary is driven by a desire to connect the dots of consumers, business strategy, innovation, and executional excellence to help his teams and businesses deliver to the best of their abilities.
Amazing. Thank you, Susan. Thank you for that great intro. Khary, welcome. I am thrilled to have this fireside chat with you today.
Anne-Marie, thank you. And thank you to everyone who's taking the time out of your day. Towards the end of the week, there's a lot you could be getting done, whether at work, time with friends or family. So I'm humbled that people are taking time to hear this conversation, but I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. So why don't we just jump right in, Khary? You have such an extensive career. Can you just walk us? I mean, I know we could take 5 years to really walk through it, but can you just kind of share your journey and some key pivotal points you'd like us to know about you?
Yeah, definitely. So it's not a straight journey. It's definitely taken a few twists and turns and probably not traditional as people see where I am and kind of think about where I began. But really, my journey, I would say, began at Temple University in Philly for undergrad. And everything I did in undergrad was actually in the entertainment industry. So a lot of things, just music and live events, more behind the scenes, like artist management, promotions, things of that nature. And so I thought that was my path. I thought I was going in to work for some of the different record labels, and that was going to be my career. However, around that time, you had Napster, you had 9/11, and I found myself, graduating from school without a job prospect because everyone I worked for, they were looking for jobs. And so I actually found my way into market research as a phone recruiter. I literally was joining a focus group to pay my portion of rent is for American Express credit cards and asked them, as I'm doing my confirmation call, are you hiring? Bought in my resume. They hired me as a phone recruiter. So I started as entry level as you can get in market research and have been in the industry ever since. And so spent about 5.5 years with a company, Schlesinger Associates. But I still had that bug of entertainment and media. And so I did start and co-founded a multimedia company. It was a good friend of mine from undergrad, and we did that for 3 years. I've worked at WPP Group, and if you're familiar with WPP Group, it's an umbrella of, I don't know, maybe 500 companies now. So I worked for one of the companies there, all global, doing biotech and pharma, quantitative market research. And as I was going through that path, one of the things I recognized when I was running my own or co-running my own company was I was lacking some skills from a negotiation and financial standpoint. And so that's when I looked at the path of maybe going back to school to pursue an MBA, and thankful and grateful enough to get into NYU. But that was the time that a week before I started, we were able to make a successful exit from our company. And so there I was in school thinking I was going to continue being an entrepreneur, and that path had come to an end, to a good end. And I found myself back in market research, but on the client side. And so I spent 10 years with General Mills, going through a series of different roles, including an expat role. I then found a fantastic opportunity that came my way from L'Oreal and switched industries and worked at L'Oreal. And then most recently, now coming up on close to 3 years with Comcast. And so, started off really thinking it was going to be in music and entertainment. Found my way into entrepreneurship, worked in market research, and have been there ever since. But I've just been in a lot of different industries. So it's been a very fun ride, that I'll say.
Yeah, it sounds exciting. And I'll tell you that it's actually very unique in our industry because in the work that we do at NAMIC, we tend to find a lot of individuals who've been in the same company or in the industry for years. So how do you strategically approach changing industries? Because that's something we get all the time with our industry changing, with just so much going on, with AI really revolutionizing how we're thinking about work. I am sure this is something that's on everyone's mind, right? How do you strategically approach changing industries and thriving?
Yeah. So for me, it was about having a common thread. And a lot of people, they kind of miss it because they look and they say, all right, you worked in food, you're working in entertainment, media, you work in telecom, you worked in beauty and luxury. Do you know what you're really looking for? And for me, it was always very simple. In each case, I was following the path of consumers. My interest was understanding your consumers. And if you think about that, the same consumer that's buying breakfast cereal in Target is the same consumer going to the beauty aisle in Target. It's the same consumer who's going home and making a decision on what their mobile service is going to be, or their cable service, or their internet, right? So that's my thread. It's always been following consumers and understanding them through all the different journeys of their lives. The funny thing is when we work in our companies, sometimes we get very focused on our category and we think about the internet consumer, and we think that the consumer who's then buying another product, they don't count. It's the same person, right? So for me, it's about understanding that's the curiosity thread I want to follow, and then also understanding what were my transferable skills that really became my currency. And then it was also, quite honestly, understanding what were things that I wanted to pick up from different industries. And so when you look at the different companies I've worked at, when I was in food in General Mills, um, for the most part, if people have it, they're going to eat food every day, right? It's one of your basic hierarchy needs is having food. And so it was an industry where, by and large, people are going to engage every day. They're going to buy the food. It's going to be built in, and you're just understanding those different moments. They may not need cake, but they need something, substance, right? Then I go to the other end of the spectrum when I went to L'Oreal, and that's luxury and beauty products. And now our consumers there, they'll tell you it was a necessity. If you look at maybe lipstick or foundation, it may not need something you need every day, but I got to see how consumers were making decisions on something you consider to be more disposable income and things that were more wants, not basic needs. And then where I find myself now within Comcast and Telecom, it's kind of in the middle. Like what we saw, especially through COVID, internet became essential. So that's like something you need every day to get your information, for education, for work, but maybe you don't need the premium video package, right? So it's been interesting. I've been able to pick up different parts of the journey for consumers along that full spectrum. So that's how I've always looking at next opportunities and deciding, one, was I going to bring something valuable to that conversation and to that situation? But two, was it going to bring something back to me to continue building my skill set? And within all that, was I going to be able to understand a different angle or aspect of consumers?
Oh, I really love that. You really touch on those core foundational things that your transferable skills. Essentially, you have skills that are applicable abroad many sectors. It could be various sectors. You just have to understand what is that core competency that you bring and what problem does it solve to the next place that you're going to. So I really love how you phrase that, looking at it not just from a title, because a title is that, and titles vary from industry to sector to departments, but really thinking about what solutions can you bring to the table and how do those cumulative skills from entrepreneurship from various industry really give you insight into that consumer mindset. So to those who are listening and are thinking, oh my gosh, I've been here for 20 years or what have you, how do I transfer? Khary just told you, look at your key assets. What do you bring to the table and how is that applicable to what that company needs? So be an answer and think of how you can leverage that. So Khary, you are a recent graduate of our ELDP class and you were selected to be the leader of your cohort. That is such a huge honor. And I remember one of the things that everybody talked about you was that you're a team leader and that you're a servant leader. So let's jump into this. How can you describe your approach to servant leadership and how has that influenced your management style?
Yeah, so I gravitate towards servant leadership, and to me, that means I'm there to serve the team and the group in a larger organization. It's not about me. Nothing gets done just by me. It's really about how do I serve those that are entrusting their careers, their day-to-day jobs to what I'm able to do as a leader. And so whether it's providing guidance, whether it's removing obstacles, whether it's providing, much needed resources, those things are important. And it's about how am I giving my team and the people around me the tools they need to thrive, to have their own accountability, to be challenged in a good way, right? Because there's so much more I can get done through a group where I'm providing for them versus me trying to do it myself and being out in front of everything and saying, hey, this is what I'm doing as a leader. It's no, I have a fantastic group of very talented people. What's the best way I can help them do their jobs? And that's going to allow my team to provide more for any organization or enterprise we're part of. And then that's going to help us make sure that voice of the consumer, which was all about the end of the day, is being considered with all the decisions organization needs to make, right? And so for me, it starts with being humble. It starts with understanding the needs of the people on the team and understanding the needs of the business and where those things are, and then figuring out what I can do to improve that situation. But it also means making sure I can bring a clear and compelling vision and be able to help craft a strategy along with my leadership team to put those things into action. And so servant leadership, I think I gravitate towards that. One, just from natural inclination, that I like to collaborate and help others. But also the best leaders I experienced in my own career, that was where they fell in kind of that category. And I saw very quickly the type of leader I wanted to learn from and that I wanted to model myself after. And those that just really weren't, they may have been very effective in short spurts, but their approach quickly burned a lot of people out. And it burned a lot of bridges in some cases. And I knew that's not what I wanted to do. And so that's really why I try to model myself and really consciously think, how can I be a servant leader in this situation, in this organization, and for this team?
Oh, I really love the strategies that you brought to that response. And one area that I want to pick apart is this, you are a leader. And that I think that is a key distinction that I think we should tease out. What is the difference between being a leader and perhaps a team manager?
Yeah. So a manager to me is you're managing resources, you're managing capacity, you're managing time, you're prioritizing things on like a project or initiative basis. You're managing the resources of an organization and people. A leader in my mind is you're setting the vision, you're setting the strategy, you're providing the resources, and you're giving your managers what they need to manage, right? And so that's the distinction to me. But it first starts with that leader is leading through strategy, through vision, through guidance, provide of resources. That manager is managing those resources, those people, those capacities, those timelines, things of that nature. It's not always a clean split, right? There's certainly things I still do in a day in, day out, which I would say is probably more of a managerial task. but it's part of me being able to be an effective leader, right? The other part about being a really good leader is if you lose touch of what it takes to be a good manager, then how can you guide and lead those managers that are under like your leadership, right?
Well
Because
said.
eventually they have to take their own path to go from being managers to growing into leaders. And if everything you do is just leadership, you're going to lose touch with that in the context and what it takes to effectively do that.
Oh, I love that. I subscribe to a very similar model. And one thing that I just wanted to also amplify in what you said is when you are a leader, there is setting a vision and being able to get people to buy into that vision and follow where you're leading. Additionally, sometimes we, in our journeys, you may have what we call a bad leader or a non-effective leader. But those leaders are also serving a purpose on your journey. And as you said, you saw those people and the impact, long-term, short-term impact they had, and that was able to guide you into who you wanted to be. And then I think down the road, we'll talk about mentorship. But I just wanted to frame that every opportunity is a learning opportunity that can help shape you into who you want to be and the outcomes you want to achieve when you're leading people or projects. So thank you for that, Khary. So let me jump into your subject matter expertise here, right? Consumer insights and marketing. How do you approach understanding consumer behavior, and what methods do you find most effective in gathering actionable insights?
Yeah. So for me, what I strive for, and it's hard to achieve, and I don't know if I've ever fully achieved it in my career, but I want to know my consumers as well as I know my best friend or I know a family member, right? And so to me, that's if I were to go out to lunch with one of my consumers and they had to go to the restroom or excuse themselves for a call, I can order their appetizer. I can say, you know what, this person, they're going to want this drink, light on the ice. They definitely want a straw, right? They want this salad with this type of dressing. I want to have that level of understanding, right? I want to get beyond just a cut of number, a data cut of this demographic, right? Or this level of education, this level of income. Those things are helpful, but it's lacking the depth and context that really helps you understand people and your consumers and make much stronger decisions and hopefully solutions for them. So that's what I strive for. Like I said, I don't know if I've ever fully gotten there in my career, but it's the challenge that keeps me going. In terms of approaches, I believe very strongly in observational learning. So observing people, um, capturing where they are in their natural context. And so one of the teams I had the pleasure of leading previously at General Mills, it was an in-context experimentation team, the ICE team. We had a really cool logo. It's a great, great team. But we specialize in in-context learning. So it wasn't about doing your traditional surveys and doing focus groups and getting people in a very controlled environment. It was about going out and learning about consumers, their thought process and their choices in the context where they would actually make a decision. So what did that look like? We would prototype different food products and we would go into different stores and we'd put the product there on shelf and we'd learn and see, are people picking this product up off a shelf? Are they putting it in their basket? Are they contemplating it? There were things we were developing for what we call like an on-the-go snack or for active people. So we bought a food truck and we would skin it and we'd go out to sporting events and we'd pitch the product, or we'd go out in front of the Target Center where the Timberwolves play and we would have the product there for sale and we'd learn through observing and engagement. I believe very much in those conversations, but you also need to combine it with what I'll call like transactional data or information, because that's the interesting thing. I talk about like a insights triangle. On one end, you have that transactional data. That's what consumers are actually doing. You can see what they're buying, the frequency, the level. But the other corner, that's what consumers tell you what they're doing, what they think they're doing, their perception. And we know as people ourselves, our perception is our reality. That's how we're informing our things. And a lot of times in business, you see those things at odds. Well, they're saying one thing, but they're doing something different. And at times it can create some confusion. But to me, it's healthy tension because that last part of that triangle is adding that context or that why. Why do consumers believe they're doing these things in this way? Or why are they making this decision, or why not? And when you bring those things together, you're able to triangulate to a much better holistic understanding of people, their decisions, their thinking. And in my mind, you can make a much better decision as an organization and as a business. And so it's about finding what we can from that transactional data, getting what we can from what consumers are thinking and perception, but really digging into that context piece, that why, because it's
Mhm.
that why that answers a lot of questions.
Wow, I really like that approach because it's almost like the antithesis of what we're seeing today, right? Companies are collecting so much data on consumers, and sometimes it's so off. So, for instance, a friend has a baby shower and I buy diapers. I mean, my social media feed and everything will be saturated with things about babies, and that, to me, that is so off, right? And then I go, really, like, your algorithms are off, because you should have looked at my pattern and realized I bought diapers 15 years ago, right, and not now. So I really like the ability of the observation, which I think is so key in actually who I know you to be now. This really illuminates a lot of things in terms of your observation skills. So I really appreciate that. It also illuminates a lot on how we cannot just rely on transactional data to make strategic decisions. So I do you have an example of how consumer insights have directly influenced a successful marketing strategy or product design?
Yeah, one of my favorite ones to talk about, because it was such a departure from what the organization was doing. If anyone is familiar with Yo Play We, it's like a indulgent French style yogurt. But I was there from the beginning of that conversation, where at that time leadership came to us, and that's when I was leading that in context team and working with a lot of other very talented people in product development and marketing. But they got us together and said, listen, we need to launch a new product. We got a year. This thing needs to break a certain threshold. It needs to be at a certain price point, and it cannot be in that plastic Yoplait cup anymore. Other than that, go off and figure out what this is going to be. Because at the time, the business was in a very challenging place. And so we were able to remove ourselves physically from headquarters, and they're in a separate building, and really work through a lot of rapid learning cycles. And as part of this, it was engaging with consumers on a daily basis. I mean, we were bringing consumers in, we're going out to speak with consumers, we're digging through a lot of data that we had available to us. And in one of the kind of prototyping sessions, we were was one of our package design companies. It was in Connecticut, and we came about the idea of a glass pot for the yogurt. And if you're in manufacturing, especially food manufacturing, what you don't want to introduce to a line that's moving very quickly is something that can shatter and get into that line, and then you have to shut it down and completely clean it out, right? You're shutting down your capacity, your efficiency. That plant runs on having a quick throughput and be able to run efficiently. And so the thought of bringing a glass pot into a running food line seemed ludicrous at the point. You also have to look at just the cost of doing a glass versus plastic, right? It's going to be a lot more in your manufacturing costs. And so it was a proposition that leadership wasn't necessarily thrilled about. But what happened is we were putting some of these glass options in front of consumers. And as they were eating the spoon, the sound of that clinking at the end, we found that became a signal, an audible signal to consumers from a sensory standpoint, that their indulgent moment was done. Their treat to themselves was done. And that was what differentiated this product from anything else that was on the shelf, where it was just a plastic and a scraping. It was that audible clink of the spoon with that glass that really made them think, you know what, this is my moment has ended. And this was meant to be a full fat, full flavor option, which was flying in the face of everything at the time, which was more health driven, the removal of ingredients. This was about being pure to a full indulgent thing. And so those things went hand in hand. But if you just went to that from a traditional transactional data standpoint or just traditional survey methods, you would say this is going to be incredibly expensive packaging option. There's risk that this may not run on our lines, and there's nothing out there on the shelf like it. Why do we have to do it? But it came through that observation with consumers, putting something in their hands and seeing that moment come to life. That became the convincing moment. And so YoPlay went on to YoPlay went from that conversation of leadership to launching within a year, which is incredibly quick for that type of organization. And it went on to break $100 million year one. It was the biggest launch in the category in 5 years. It won numerous awards for being best product designs, new product designs. And that would not have happened if we weren't willing to take that approach of observing consumers, listening to consumers, and being able to pair that with data that we knew and what we knew from more traditional ways. And so that was in my mind, continues to stand out as a wonderful example of when you're willing to go against what you think is the right way to do things and really say, what are we trying to understand and learn? And let that lead what we're going to do. You can see some really good things happen. And through that process, we also identified a lot of paths that if you did your very traditional, I don't know, like bases, like Nielsen bases thing would have worked. But when we got in front of consumers, you saw that it was not going to resonate. It wasn't going to move the needle. And it was likely not the type of innovation we were looking for. And so as much as it helped us go down the right path, it also kept us from going down wrong paths very quickly.
Oh, I really, really like that level of collaboration, of leadership, of stepping aside, those balcony moments where you have to really think. It kind of now really segues really greatly into the next segment of our conversation, which is problem solving and innovation, because I just had all those being discussed in this one example. And the minute I had like YoPlay we, I really thought it was French. Just that's where my mind went. And I was like, yeah, oui, je m'appelle, oui, right? And I was thinking French. And if you really want to observe the French, glass would absolutely be the way to go.
Yeah.
Anyway, but we can go down that rabbit hole. Let's talk about, and by the way, everybody who's submitting questions, I can see them. I see this one question about servant leadership. I want to acknowledge that I'm going to get to that question, but we just had a really good segue into problem solving and innovation. And I just want to tackle that. And then I'm coming to that question. So, Khary, how do you tackle, like you just gave us a phenomenal example, and I'm sure you have many others of how you tackle nebulous problems, simplify them into actionable solutions and recommendations, and then how you shift through the noise, right? There's a lot of noise, even in that phase of discovery that you just talked about. There's often noise, there's often contradictory data. There's often somebody who's just, we love those people too. I love the people who tell us it won't work. I love those people because they make you think harder and you think through the various angles that you may not actually think about. So how do you shift through the noise? What is that? What makes the difference for you in terms of where you go, no, I heard you, but this is how we are going? How do you do that?
So if you're doing that with a group of people, what I find to be most effective is get to an understanding from the beginning. This is the role I would like for you to play. I need you to be the person that's going to poke holes in everything, right? And you try to do it for the person. If you've worked with them before, you may already know they're the person that tends to be more on the cautious side, and they want to point out all the things that can go wrong. If you assign that to them, they will love that role, and they know I get to do that, and no one's going to look at me weird because we're coming to agreement. This is actually the role I need you to play. Right. And if it works out that way, you can have someone who's your creative thinker, the person who thinks about the possibilities. You want to have your person who's maybe really good at operating, someone who knows how to actually build, launch, and actually scale something up. So it comes from, there was a book I read many years ago. I think it's The Six Thinking Hats. Right. So it's definitely not I didn't create it, but I love the approach where each hat represents a different angle you need someone to play as you're working through problems or creating new opportunities. And so I've put it to practice a lot of times. It's like if you can give people those assignments and you all agree that's what you're going to do, you're one, surrounding yourself with a lot of different perspectives. So you don't have to worry about figuring out all the angles. You worry about your angle. What's also helpful is having a process for then how do you get all those things out on the table, but then work through this pile of observations to what's going to be the next step. And to me, if I had to simplify it, it's look at those things that are in front of you, see if there's some underlying themes. And in most parts, you'll be able to kind of put them into bigger categories. And so you might take 50 things, but they fit into 4 different categories. And as you go through those, depending on what you're looking to do and the problem you're trying to solve, it's if we attack this or we approach this and work through it, at the end, what is the result? Is it going to make a big difference? Are we just validating what we kind of already know and have information on, but we're going to feel good about answering that question? What I like to do is gravitate teams towards what are the areas or the actions that we can form that we know the least amount about, but we know would be critical to the next step, right? You kind of put in that quadrant of critical for next step, not critical. We know a lot, we don't know a lot, right? Or however you reverse that.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start to see where things fall. And a lot of times when teams are approaching problems or issues, a lot of things fall into a bucket of, yeah, we can answer it, but it's not going to make a difference. Or we actually already know this from a lot of different conversations. We just want to look at it again to validate what we already know and feel good about that. And then it starts to become a lot more clear. What are the things that are no longer noise? What are the things you need to focus on attacking, solving, and digging into? So that's, if I had to put into 2 or 3 minutes, those are some of the things I like to leverage and I found to be very helpful and very successful. But it's first and foremost, it's start with a good, clear expectation up front, especially if you're working with a team. If you're doing that on your own, figure out if you know how to have those different angles as a single person. And also recognizing and knowing yourself, knowing, hey, naturally, I'm really good at operationalizing things and refining things. I'm not good on the creative front. So know where your strengths are.
Yeah.
And know how to build in a plan around that. And there's no lack of people that are willing to help you. Speak to someone who works in strategic development or corporate strategy or has worked in management consulting. They are a wealth of knowledge of different frameworks and templates that can to help you think through this. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I think it's know your strengths, know where the resources are, and have clarity and expectations that are set up front.
Well said. So let me quickly get to our questions. Thank you, everybody, for the really good questions. The first one is, how do you balance the needs of the business with a servant heart?
How do I balance the needs of the business with a servant heart?
Yeah.
That's a good question. It's not easy, but it can definitely be done. Know what things are important to you. Know what things are important to your career. Be clear on what your values are. And then make sure or do your best to make sure you're working as an organization that aligns fairly well with that, right? So a lot of it is what are you doing up front? Being choiceful about where you're spending your time. Be choiceful about where you're bringing your talents. What do you know about that company, those leadership teams, and that culture? And how well does it line up with your values and your approach to things? Because if you're finding those things are out of whack from the beginning, but you're enthralled by the title or maybe the position or perhaps a conversation, you're going to have that struggle on a daily basis. It's not going to be a good place to be. But if you can start from the beginning of finding some place where it's pretty decent overlap between your values and the leader you are and want to be and develop into, and the values of that company and that leadership team and that culture, then that's going to be a much easier place to be able to navigate that. I think another part about that for me, I'm a consumer insights person. I represent the voice of the consumer in everything I do. But one of the things I developed was a very strong business acumen, and I attribute it to when I went to business school. I could have done marketing and really just double down on what I already knew, but I actually ended up with a concentration in corporate finance. And what that allowed me to do is understand, I look at finances, it's the language of business, right? It is. Decisions are made or not made at the end of the day of what's the impact going to be from a financial standpoint. So it helped me understand how all my different counterparts and coworkers and stakeholders, how they might be approaching things. So that as I was approaching things from a consumer standpoint and bringing consumers perspective, I started to learn to be, it's consumer first, but it's not consumer only. It's what are the needs of the consumer? What's going to be helpful for them? How do we voice their opinions? But do that in a way that considers all the other variables of running a business or organization. And when you're able to do that, it helps you serve not only your team and your people, helps you not only serve your consumers, but also helps you serve your company, your business, and the organization. So it's not always the easiest thing to do, but if you pick the right company, the right cultures, if you're honest about yourself and what's important to you and your values, and then you understand all the different variables that need to work in orchestration with each other, it makes it a lot easier to do, and it illuminates a much clearer path for you to walk down.
Oh, that response is so rich and so loaded on so many levels. I cannot believe that we are almost at time. But as I'm thinking through that, as people are thinking through their ideas, or maybe when you have a really good idea and you come to the table and it doesn't get picked, what Khary just said is you have to think about it through multiple lenses. What is everybody's interest at the table, and what lens will they look at your idea from? So be very strategic in how you bring an idea to the table, knowing that you've done your discovery, knowing that you understand how finance, how marketing, how the developers, how everybody else will look at that idea, if you really want it to then take hold and get implemented, because we do have a tendency to see things from our lens, our expertise, right? And it's not that it's a bad idea. It's just that maybe you needed a little more insight, a little more homework, a little more coalition building before you brought it to the table. Like, run it by other people. Be a collaborator, right? Don't be the person who just wants to say, I had the greatest idea. It was me, 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 and everybody, because sometimes that's what trips people up, right? But being able to collaborate with others so that by the time it comes to whatever table people need to hear it, then you actually have supporters. And you hope that they will give you credit for your idea as well. So that was so loaded on so many levels. Thank you for that. That was such a well thought through approach on how to really bring those ideas to the table, even as a servant leader, and understand what the priorities are, as well as aligning with your values. I will take this moment to say, if you have not taken leadership seminar, there's something called your life portfolio that would really help you think through what your life portfolio looks like, not just your financial portfolio. And that has to do with also aligning your values, right? And where you choose to earn a living and contribute to your time. So just wanted to frame that. So with the limited time we have, I can't believe it, Khary. The time just flew. Oh my goodness. Let's talk about strategic negotiations. This was
Yeah.
so key because I think people will learn so much from this. Could you share with us how you strategically negotiate opportunities for your next level or your next move?
Yeah. So I'll use the example that taught me that there was value in this. And so once I graduated from grad school and I started with my organization at General Mills, one of the things that appealed to me was the opportunity to do work globally. And so every conversation, it was checking in with my manager, speaking to the head of the function, doing like your performance reviews. Even as an intern, I was just dropping in. I'd love to work globally. I'd love to go to these different locations and work with global teams. But it didn't really hit me until maybe 4 years into my time there, is that there's nothing special about me asking that, because every other person was likely asking the same thing. And so when you put yourself in the shoes of people that are in talent management or your managers or a leader organization, you have to recognize they're hearing it not only from you, but everybody else that they come in contact with. And so what's going to make you stand out?
Mhm.
And so for me, I started to recognize that um, as they're making those choices and decisions, they're making an investment. It's a business. And with any investment, you want to see a return and you want to know what the return is going to be. You want to have some level of certainty around that return, right? And so that took me back to some of my financial training. And so what I started to do was position the things that I wanted as I recognize you're going to invest in me to do this. And here's what I think I can return to you because of that. And so when I started positioning things that way, I started to get different conversations, different doors start to open because they start to recognize this person understands what we're trying to do. We want to invest in giving them this opportunity and developing this way because we think we're going to get something back. And we think we can get it back more from this person than we can the other 15 people that are asking for the same thing. Right. And so for me, that's what's been very helpful. I look at the skills or the opportunities or the things that I'd like to pursue. And I look at it and say, all right, if they were to invest in me this way, what can I bring back to the organization? And do I think I can do it in a way that's better or different than other people that are potentially looking at this? You kind of have to gauge what is your likelihood, right? And then if I feel good about that, like it's going to check a box for me of it's going to build a critical skill, give me a critical experience, exposure to something. I feel confident that I can bring something to it of value. And I think that if I get that opportunity, I can accelerate what I can bring back. I can add a multiple. And that's how I like to position. That's how I like to pursue it. It doesn't work all the time because, you know, you have to recognize, again, there are other people that might be better suited, and that's fine. But that positioning and that conversations have gotten much further than when before I was just saying, I want to do this because it was all I focus, me. I want to do this. Of course,
Mhm.
who doesn't want to do this? But when I said, I think if you invest in me this way, this is what I can bring back to you. And here's the reason I have to believe that I can do that if you invest in me that way. That changed the conversations. And that's where organizations start to say, we're going to invest in you this way because we believe in you this way. But it started from me framing it up that way.
Fantastic. What a great segue to this question that I want to talk to you about for anybody who's aspiring, anybody who's new in our industry. What advice would you give to them in terms of investing in themselves, in terms of thinking through their career trajectory, especially with the landscape that we have right now?
It's so wide open right now. And in some senses, it may feel too wide open because there's so
Mhm.
many things that we can do. So that's where you have to have that honest conversation with yourself and say, what am I good at? What am I not good at? The things I'm not good at, do I think I can improve on it? Can I build on it? Do I just need more time experiences it? Or that's just not my thing? You know,
Mhm.
what am I strong at? How can I build a multiple of that? So I think it's one, getting honest and clear yourself on those things, understanding what things you have a certain level of passion for. It helps. It's not needed, but it's very helpful as you put together what your career can look like and what you think you can travel through. And then understand the different skills and experiences are going to help you get to where you want to get. That's key,
Yeah.
right? There are some people that kind of stumble their way forward and they fall into opportunities, and that's fine. It works for some people. That approach is about not having blinders on. That's about being open to possibilities, and that's about understanding in very few places is there a clear path upwards, especially if you work in a corporate environment. It just doesn't exist as much as it may have in the past, right? So it's good to take those blinders off and be open to it, but you want to put a little bit of structure behind it. And so for people who are entering in and thinking about their careers, I say be clear with where you are in your goals and your skills. Be open to the possibility of things. Be curious. Curiosity, it's such an undervalued thing. Be curious, always learn, right? Be open to learning and things and find a good group of people to help you along the way. You will not do it on your own. You should not do it on your own. And so whether it's a program, whether it's something like NAMIC or, even at my level doing EDLP, that's something that I wanted to have invested in me. I thought I can bring something back from it, but I learned so much from being surrounded by all the people in that program, right? But that came from me being honest with myself and saying, I think this can be useful and here's why. So those are things I'd give to anyone at any stage of their career that I think would be of value.
Fantastic. I'm going to get to the questions, and I think some of these are comments. So, and then we're going to get into the rapid fire questions. So, I think, okay, let me read this. With such a diverse background, do you at times find through the company you work for and the targeted consumers may change, and overall the skill set and goals for the role generally, but the role generally remains the same? I think if I can just attempt at this question is that when you're looking at consumer habits and you're looking at consumer targets, that is bound to change. And I think Khary has discussed this in great length. I think it's a question of what if the role remains the same? Khary, how would you tackle that?
I guess it depends on, from what I'm picking up from this question, it feels like the staying the same actually is not a good thing in this. So in that, I think you need to look and say, what is there within this role that I can actually change? And again, go back to that framework. What can I change about this that would be of value to the organization? And how do you work that plan? It's like, hey, this is what this role is currently doing. It's good, it works. But I think if we change these aspects of this role, here's what I think we'll get out of it more as a company, as an organization, as a team, a different level of understanding consumers or whatever your function is, and then work through small proofs of changing it. So there's one way of trying to drive change from within. What I find for a lot of bigger organizations, there's a certain level of risk aversion. And so if you go out and find non-competitive examples as benchmarks and proxies and have conversations, bringing examples of like, hey, XYZ corporations that are of same size, roughly revenue, number of employees, markets they serve, but non-competitor, those things tend to get a lot of traction. You can say, from what I understand, their role there that does this, there's these different things built into it that I think it could be of value. So there's one way of changing and trying to change from within. The other one is really looking at and saying, if that's no longer serving you or invigorating you, how do you find your next opportunity that you think can do a better job of serving that? But for those, there's risk built into that. You're joining a new organization, a new structure. There's only so much you can learn through an interview process. And so I would advise, do your best to find someone who works there in your network and have a conversation that's not just a formal interview, but really get to kind of pull some of the pieces apart and understand, would that culture and that job fulfill your needs of changing that role and what it looks like. So I hope that answered the question, but
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
the way I'm hearing
Yeah,
it.
the way it read and the way we received it, I think you did. Nothing is permanent. You can frame it and you can mold it if you show the company the value of what you're trying to do. So I think that was great. Let me quickly do rapid fire because we are down to the minute. So how fast can you go with rapid fire, Khary? Because I'm about to just hit you with the questions. Let's go. What's one skill set that every executive should possess?
Listening.
What's the most important lesson you've learned from failure?
Get up and try it again, but don't repeat what you did to fail.
Awesome. What's your favorite quote and why?
The greatest lesson I ever learned has yet to be taught. It's been in my high school yearbook, and ever since then, if you look at my email signature at work, it's in my email signature. And to me, it's just a reminder, the best things have yet to be done. The best experiences have yet to happen. Your best thoughts, your biggest impact have yet to happen. And so there's always opportunity to learn. There's always opportunity to do more. So the greatest lesson ever learned has yet to be taught.
I love that. I saw that on your signature, and I'm glad you expounded on that. Who's your favorite author and why?
I'm not going to say written author. I'm actually going to say my parents. I would say my parents have written a pretty good life for me and my two siblings. I'm very thankful to them for that. They would probably say their author is God. But I definitely look at my parents and I'm thankful for the life they've spent their time writing together, and I get to be a beneficiary of that.
Oh my gosh, that's the sweetest response I've ever had. Amazing. What's your favorite productivity hack?
Ooh, make time. I work very closely with my team, and what I do now is I take a day a month, and it's just a day of learning and getting through things. It's a day of it's kind of structured where I'll spend 2 hours catching up on what's happening in the industry and 2 hours reviewing everything about consumers, just really digging in and nerding out. 2 hours kind of looking at the strategies I have for the team, right? Those type of things. But it all starts from making time and protecting that time. That's my productivity hack. Make time.
Big time. I love it. What's your favorite?
Guard the time.
Guard your time, right? Because everybody will try to take it away from you. You got to be very guarded about that.
Yeah.
What's your favorite song and why?
I don't have one, but I'll say right now it's Everybody Loves the Sunshine by Roy Ayers.
Oh, I
It's
love it.
I won't say anything else on that, but right now that's my favorite song in rotation.
Awesome. Who's your favorite comedian and why?
Pretty similar, but right now it's been a lot of going back and listen to a lot of George Carlin,
Mm,
but also a lot of Dave Chappelle, because they look at life and they make observations, and then they put it into a way that helps you think but also laugh at the same time, and I enjoy that challenge of, no, that's actually a real situation or a real thing, but there's some humor in that, but it also makes me look at myself in some instances and just say, right, challenge your own thoughts. So that's what I appreciate about their comedy.
I really like that. Oh my goodness, we are out of time. It is 5:33, everyone. Thank you so much for spending your hour with us. We know that time is a precious gift, and we hope that we made it worth your while. We have a few questions that actually comments that I did not get to because they were just comments. Thank you for those very lovely comments from TJ and from Irene. We do have one question that is about how do you navigate this as a person of color? What I'd like to share with you is I will get that response from Khary and I will include it in when we share the video from today. So thank you so much, Khary. Thank you. That was so insightful. So many nuggets. Obviously, an hour was not enough because we could keep going. I want to thank you for the gift of your time and your expertise to our members. Thank you to our members. Thank you for the 150 people that registered for this webinar. We really appreciate you. And thank you for always coming back. We've seen a couple of repeat individuals. So we look forward to seeing you next month when we'll be having another learning session and sharing this wisdom nuggets from careers that are just thriving in this industry. Keep bringing your questions and give us ideas about what you want to listen to. I've been your host, Anne Marie Burton. This is NAMIC. We love you and see you next time.